Warning: major spoilers for all films mentioned in this video. Possibly even Star Wars 9: The Rise of Skywalker. So when I started this idea, it was supposed to be a joke. But as I developed it further, I started to realize that a lot of things just added up, making the Star Wars theory plausible. Let's dive in. When I heard that Project Luminous was announced, it brought to mind the quote from Yoda in Episode 5 about the spiritual nature of beings in the universe.
Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the force around you.
In Thor Skywalker's YouTube video, The Rise of Skywalker will change the nature of the Force? He discusses how it will cause or deal with a major change to the Force and the implications that it has for the future of the Star Wars franchise. It's a good video, and you should check it out. Link in the description. What I want to focus on is his idea that in the upcoming Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, the film will contain or end with a major change to the nature of the Force, and Project Luminous will pick up the pieces. If there is a change to the Force, that would mean an end to the Star Wars franchise as we know it, as well as a major in-world change to all the other beings in the universe. Because as we know, the Force touches all living things.
The Force? The Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
The name Luminous suggests something to do with Force ghosts. As Thor Skywalker points out, this change may come in Episode 9 because of Kevin Smith's comment that the end of the movie will melt your mind, which may suggest a rather trippy ending to the film, especially if it has something to do with changing the nature of the Force. Okay, so far I've just been rehashing and adding to pre-existing material. Now let's go a little further. What else can we get from what we've been given? Let's take a look outside the story for a moment. It's easy to see that relations between the current creators of Star Wars media and the fan base have been, well, let's say complicated. Many fans have been very vocal about their distaste for films such as Episode 8, The Last Jedi, creating difficult expectations for future installments such as Episode 9, which is tagged as being the end of the Skywalker saga. In other words, the current Star Wars media creators are faced with making a new ending to a beloved franchise, which has once again come under strenuous criticism from its fan base. You may begin to see where I'm going with this, but in case you do not, I have one more in-world story fact that we need to be aware of. One of the main and intrinsically most powerful characters in the Sequel Trilogy, who is probably going to be one of the most important players in bringing balance or change to the Force, is a nobody girl called Rey. That's right. What I've been building up to this whole time is that Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, is going to be the Star Wars equivalent of Hideaki Anno's film End of Evangelion, the finale to the legendary anime Neon Genesis Evangelion. I know that sounds like a joke, and at first it was intended to be way back when I just left it as a funny comment on Thor's YouTube video. But after going over more evidence, I think this theory actually has some legitimacy to it. Now you might say, Disney wouldn't plagiarize a film like End of Eva, but if you don't think Disney hasn't already ripped off this artistically divisive film, then you need to watch Couch T's video 24 Reasons End of Evangelion and Avengers Infinity War are the same movie. It's startling how accurate it is. So much is the same, right down to everyone dying at the end. Link in the description. Okay, so with an open mind, let's go over what we know so far and compare it to End of Eva to figure out what will happen in Episode 9. First, the most obvious. The character Rey in the sequel trilogy has been built up simultaneously as an extremely powerful Force user and a nobody with a mysterious past. Rey in the series, Neon Genesis Evangelion, is initially just a strange girl with a mysterious past and then becomes a major instrument in the literal end of the world. Speaking of which, the apocalypse, called the Third Impact in End of Eva, brought on by the Human Instrumentality Project, causes all the people in the world to essentially lose their individuality, allowing their consciousnesses to merge with one another in a cosmic primordial soup. Ultimately, humans are allowed to regain their individuality, but the Third Impact has nonetheless permanently changed the world of Evangelion. Similarly, with Project Luminous being solicited as a major change to the nature of the Force and its connection to Yoda's phrase about luminous beings, or Force ghosts, which may be seen as the consciousness of the beings of the universe, it is clear that Project Luminous is not just a book franchise, but also an in-world conspiracy to cause all life in Star Wars to be reduced to Force ghosts, essentially merging with the Force so that the franchise can be forever changed when the characters are given their physical individuality again. This could only be accomplished through an incredibly trippy sequence, the likes of which would be similar to the Third Impact in End of Eva. After all, Kevin Smith said the end would melt our minds, and Anno's film certainly did that to mine, so... Now, back to the real-world similarities between the two films. The Star Wars franchise, especially the original trilogy, have been a beloved pop culture icon. But every time new movies come out, they are subject to heavy criticisms from many, but not all, fans. Most severely with recent installments like Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Similarly, the anime series Neon Genesis Evangelion is also extremely popular, but its last two episodes were panned by many, but not all, fans. According to anime folklore, Anno created the film End of Evangelion as a response to and criticism of his audience. Regardless of its intent, the point is that End of Eva acts as a new ending to the franchise, replacing the last two episodes, just as the Rise of Skywalker will act as a new ending to the Star Wars film saga, replacing Return of the Jedi, essentially. So now the question is, will Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, be exactly the same film as End of Evangelion? Well, not exactly. It would be too obvious if the film was exactly the same movie. I think Disney knows that doing something that, unique in one film would immediately destroy fan relations to Star Wars. Rather, they have stretched out End of Eva over all three sequel trilogy films, hiding scenes from the film in episodes 7 and 8, and preparing us for those final, psychedelic Third Impact scenes by, similar to the anime, feeding us small scenes leading up to it. Rey's dream sequence when she grabs Luke's lightsaber in The Force Awakens, and the water cave in The Last Jedi, are like the character introspection scenes from the later half of Neon Genesis Evangelion. When Rey speaks to Kylo Ren via the Force connection established by Snoke in Episode 8, it is actually preparing us for the concept of luminous beings, all being interlinked through the Force, similar to how the episodes The Sickness Unto Death and Of the Shapes of Heart and Humans prepares us for the events of the Third Impact. Beyond preparing us for Episode 9, the end of Star Wars, there are scenes scattered throughout Episode 8 and Episode 7 that are taken directly from Anno's controversial film. Of course, sometimes they are not directly copied, but rather paraphrased by mixing characters and whatnot. By discovering these and checking them off, we can safely predict what will happen in Rise of Skywalker by process of elimination. Whatever we haven't seen, we can safely say will happen next. We've already been over the dream sequences, so let's start there. In the end of Evangelion, there is a scene where the third Rey faces the fact that she is a clone, by literally facing the remains of her fellow clones. The Last Jedi hints at this same origin by calling its Rey a child of nobodies, starting the theory that she is a clone, which, when compared to End of Eva, is confirmed by showing us her dream where she faces her clones. When we think that she is going to see her parents, it actually is a picture of herself, which we'll get back to later. The scene in End of Eva, where the pilot Asuka and her Eva are impaled by Seely's Eva mass production types, is mirrored by the scene when Luke's Force projection is blown to bits by the First Order's AT-ATs. As the lifeless body of Eva Unit 1 floats adrift in space after it is used to initiate the third impact, so too does Princess General Leia Organa after her command bridge is destroyed. Shinji, the pilot of Unit 1, mopes around feeling sorry for himself and refusing to join the battle for most of the movie, translated as Luke in The Last Jedi. Both are partially drug out of their slump by an important female character. In Luke's case, it is Rey. In Shinji's case, it is Misato. Epic battle with the Praetorian Guard? How about the battle between Asuka and Seely's Evas? However, this is a stretch because Rey is not alone. More on this later. Nerve contemplates its demise, just as the Resistance waits for its doom. Both are almost destroyed by their respective enemies, which are actually political rivals if you dig up some lore. You may begin to believe that Episode 8 is the only one stealing scenes from Eva, and at first I thought so too. But then I realized that Episode 7 contains the prelude, the dreaded hospital scene in the form of Kylo Ren interrogating Rey, who shortly thereafter hones her powers similar to Asuka at the bottom of the lake. It also contains the mid-credits from End of Eva. Yeah, Anno put the credits for his film not at the end, or even at the beginning, but in the middle of the movie. And the sequel trilogy is no different. Now, to get this one, you must understand that the sequel trilogy is not actually a trilogy by Star Wars standards. No, this isn't sequels aren't canon stuff. That's for other people's videos. What I mean is that each film in the original and prequel trilogy are each set a certain amount of time removed from one another. For example, Episode 5 is 3 years after Episode 4, and Episode 6 is 1 year after Episode 5, thus making them 3 distinct movies because of time gaps in between them. With this in mind, now we turn to the sequels. Episode 9 is said to be 1 year after Episode 8, so it is a distinct movie. However, Episode 8 is literal moments, if not seconds, after the end of Episode 7. Therefore, it is not a separate movie, but rather the second half of the previous film divided only by a mid-film credit sequence, thus mirroring the credits of End of Evangelion. So, with all this out of the way, what can we expect to see in The Rise of Skywalker besides the third impact? Well, first of all, if the Knights of Ren do make an appearance, then we will get a repeat of the Asuka versus Eva's scene. This time, we will see their mock spears of Longinus in the form of the double-bladed red lightsabers. The Knights of Ren will also act in the same way as Seely's Evas during the third impact, or Project Luminous, as it will be in Episode 9. Similarly, Rey and Kylo will be the 2 key parts of Project Luminous, just like Rey and Shinji. In place of Rey developing feelings for Shinji, Rey will continue trying to save Kylo from the dark side. This is what will lead to several introspective scenes about Kylo trying to figure out his emotional issues, deciding first to kill everyone, and then bring them all back, just like Shinji. This also explains Snoke. If the Knights of Ren are enemies of Emperor Palpatine, then that means that Supreme Commander Snoke was the equivalent of that guy from Seely. By the way, Palpatine is Gendo, even creating the Rey clones and wishing ultimately to merge all life so he can see Shmi Skywalker again. I know that sounds nuts, but hear me out. In End of Evangelion, Gendo wants to see his wife Yui again, willing to cruelly manipulate and sacrifice his son Shinji. Since there's now a canon comic where Palpatine influences the midichlorians to impregnate Shmi, then he did in fact cruelly manipulate his son Anakin and will sacrifice his great-grandson Kylo Ren, aka Ben Solo. This, by extension, means that Rey is a clone of Shmi, and she even looks like she could be a younger Shmi. This will actually give a good explanation as to why Palpatine comes back from the dead to be the villain in Episode 9. Now, this part is going to be a little controversial, but will tie into George Lucas's original idea for a sequel trilogy based on the microscopic nature of the Force. At some point in the film, someone will learn and explain the true nature of the midichlorians, like Misato learns and tells the true nature of the Evas, Angels, and LCL. This may be C-3PO reading a Sith holocron, thus turning his eyes red. In order to cause Project Luminous, Palpatine takes Rey to the source of midichlorians, just like Gendo takes Rey to Lilith and the Chamber of Guff. All life has midichlorians, and they, like LCL, can be used to merge all life. There are many more parallels to be drawn from the previous two films, and more that can be predicted about the Rise of Skywalker by examining End of Evangelion, in light of current information regarding the future of Star Wars. Because it is mainstream Star Wars and Disney, I don't think we will see as many overt allegories in Episode 9 as in End of Evangelion. Especially not the criticism of audiences or the confusing epilogue. But many story beats and entire scenes have already been seen in 7 and 8, so it is certain that more will show up in the next film. A film that will almost certainly be a new and controversial end to a beloved franchise. I have been amazed at how well this theory, that started as a joke, has, at least in my mind, explained and justified so many things found in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. I'm certain that as more details are released leading up to Episode 9's debut, they will only work to prove this theory even further, right up until the film is released and disproves the whole thing. Star Wars X Evangelion theory. Unlike everything else on YouTube, this video was not sponsored by Skillshare. On our next episode of Outlandish Conclusions That Might Be True, I'll go over why the prequel movies are actually the anime film Akira. Or maybe not. I don't know. We'll see what happens. This video took a long time to make. Anyway, I've been your host, Frank Sona, here on the channel I Talk Too Much. Tune in next time for lots more fan service.